Hey, it's Drybear. Another week has come and went, and it's time to check in on the healer rankings for week 6 in Dragonflight. We'll compare all 7 healing specializations to each other in Raid and in Mythic Plus to see which ones are stacking up the most. As always, if you have any questions or comments for me, you'll find me live every day on twitch.tv/Drybear. Come by and say hi. We'll start by looking at the healers from last week. So we are currently at the end of week 6. These are the numbers and performances from week 5. You can see that last week, Preservation won in every single category, beating out every healer in the game, closely tying Restoration Druid for Mythic Plus, but still being at the top. This is after we got a buff for Mistweaver, which seemed to have a positive effect, and Holy Priest received a buff as well. So let's check out the numbers going into week 6. And boom, here we are into week 6. Almost the same. There's some shifts here that are kind of interesting. Overall, Preservation still takes the top slot, and it does seem like on the weeks that are tyrannical, Restoration Druid outperforms Preservation in Mythic Plus, which sort of makes sense. Restoration Druid being one of the most mobile and free-form healers in the game. They don't have to stand and cast very much at all outside of regrowth and wild growth, and even that they can kind of work their way around quite easily. So when you have very mobile, long duration, tyrannical boss fights in Mythic Plus, they tend to do exceptionally well. One thing to keep in mind though, there is some buffs coming for Restoration Shaman, Discipline Priest, and Mistweaver Monk. And there's also, shockingly, a nerf, a healing nerf coming for Restoration Druid, though they are getting some talent reworks that might have a positive effect on them. We'll see how that goes. I was actually kind of shocked to see the 10.0.5 addendum having only a nerf for Restoration Druid and no adjustments for Preservation. It could be that they're just waiting to see what the temporal anomaly changes are going to have how that's going to affect Preservation. It may not be. So next week, look forward to week 7. Week 7, the numbers are going to be all over the place for all of the roles because there's buffs and nerfs and reworks going all over the place. But this is week 6. You can see that Preservation, like I said, still taking the top slot overall. It's hard to beat them. They have one of the best raid cooldowns in the game. They have such incredible burst. Echo can magnify all of their AoE heals substantially, and they have really great ways to store and release heals with stasis. Their throughput is just through the roof. It's very hard to deal with. In the second place is Restoration Druid. They have been fighting for that first spot. And as of last week and this week, Preservation has been winning that pretty handily. And like I said, in Mythic Plus, Restoration Druid kind of pushing ahead on tyrannical weeks or what we just talked about. Holy Priest was kind of in that middle clump. So where before they made the buffs to Mistweaver and Holy Priest, it was Holy Priest, Resto Shaman, Holy Paladin in the middle clump. And then down at the bottom, Mistweaver actually used to be about where Discipline was performance-wise. And then Mistweaver got that big buff on damage output and a little bit of healing throughput, and it buffed them up and put them in the middle. And then the Holy Priest buffs put Holy Priest kind of above, in between the top tier Preservation and Restoration Druid category, and then the middle folk in the middle, which is about what we're seeing this week. Not too many major changes there, although we did see Restoration Shaman start to come up a little bit from last week, which is kind of cool. And it's also something to look forward to as well, because not only will we have Restoration Shaman buffs going into next week, we'll also have the Catalyst, which means that anyone that's missing their 4 set can actually get it a lot easier and should have it for parsing next week. So I'm excited to see how that works. Again, Holy Paladin is in the 5th slot. One caveat here is that Holy Paladin brings so much more than just HPS. They're typically seen as utility, spot healing, which is healing one person who's about to die, and then tank healing. And there's no one that does it better than Holy Paladin. They have always been the kings and queens of that. And honestly, it's even if they were at the bottom of this list, you would still see probably one Holy Paladin in progression groups anyways for what they provide for the group. But that's not the case. They're still doing about in the middle of the pack here. You can see that they're kind of keeping up with the other specs. They're not as, they can't really hold a candle to the busted Preservation Restoration Druid, but I think that's fine because again, Holy Paladin, you don't get Holy Paladins specifically just for their HPS and their overall performance. It's really other things that go into that. However, Restoration Shaman, or actually even Mistweaver and Discipline Priest, you would pick them for their throughput. and the fact that they're underneath Holy Paladin and they're underneath all these classes here is kind of rough. So we'll see what the changes do. It's possible we'll have a caster Mistweaver spec available in 10.0.5. Shadowlands Gift is returning from Legion. There's some changes that go into that, and it's possible that we might see not just fist weaving coming into the next patch. And then down there at the very bottom is Discipline. And this is something that I'm shocked it took all the way until like last minute buffs, the addendum to the 10.0.5 patch notes, for them to make major changes to Discipline. They're doubling the Radiance healing. They're adding more to Flash Heal and Renew. Hopefully overall it makes a big difference. If, you know, I don't know if it's going to be enough, but hopefully it is. And one thing that's interesting too is even though Discipline is doing so poorly, you can see that Mistweaver is actually underperforming. They're underscoring the Discipline in Mythic Plus. So that kind of goes to show that Mistweaver needs a little bit of love there too. So this is kind of like the last week before we get major changes, and we'll see what happens next week for the healers. But it's pretty exciting. It's nice to see the new class doing well. The Preservation kind of started out slow, but they ramped real fast. Their output is insane, and part of why they do so well in Raid is getting targeted in 10.0.5, mainly because they can just scale temporal anomalies with echoes on everyone. It just boosts their healing, and then they can stasis that, do multiple temporal anomalies on top of that. So there's some changes that are coming to TA that will make it less abusable, if you want to use that word, in a Raid setting. And then Mythic Plus, they're still pretty close. I would say that Holy Priest, Holy Paladin, Preservation Evoker, and Restoration Druid all do relatively, like, reasonably within the same bracket for Mythic Plus. And then in Mythic Plus, Restoration Shaman, Discipline Priest, and Mistweaver Monk are definitely in the gutter. They're struggling a bit. It doesn't mean you can't do high keys. I think all of the classes here can do AOTC and most of Mythic, and they can also do, you know, upwards of 22 to 24 keys if you're playing properly and you have a good group. But obviously there is a difference between a Discipline Priest and a Preservation Evoker that is quite stark and hard to ignore. So looking forward to next week. Let's see what happens with all the changes and reworks. Let me know what your thoughts are about the healings situation right now in Dragonflight Season 1. I hope that, you know, if you're on the lower end of performance, that you're not giving up, because things always boomerang back. And if you're at the top, I hope you're just carrying your groups and helping the other healers out, keeping people alive in your content. As always, if you have any questions or comments for me, you'll find me live every day on twitch.tv/Drybear. Come by and say hi. If you enjoyed yourself today, leave a like down below. You can support me and my work on Patreon and view Patreon exclusive content, link in the description. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.